Hello, my name is Tom Orr. I'm with thinkASG. I'm your host for this evening's SAP HANA on IBM Power Linux presentation. I'll be introducing our guest speakers this evening. We hope to make this a very educational and interactive evening. Look forward to your feedback and questions, both the people joining us via the live stream and of course our guests here this evening. To start off with, I'd like to introduce you to Alfred Friedenbacher with IBM. Alfred is the SAP Power subject matter expert for North America. We have Rod Davis, our very own thinkASG solution architect. Rod is focused on enterprise servers, storage infrastructure design and implementation. And then Doug Carlson, business unit executive for IBM. Doug is the Power Ecosystems and ISV strategy for North American Power Systems and Linux Servers solution. We have a PowerPoint that Alfred's going to start the presentation off with, and then we'll go into some Q&A type of questions and look forward to your questions. Alfred?
Thank you, Tom. So this is a very exciting time for IBM and SAP with the introduction and the availability of HANA on IBM Power Systems. This is an evolution that's happened over the last few years, and it really kicked into high gear in August of last year when HANA on Power was formally made generally available to customers. Since that time, it has been a rapid progression of availability of various different products from SAP on the Power platform. In fact, the support availability matrix has just, it's one of these things you have to check every week just about, multiple times a week, because so many of the products that SAP has available are being introduced as being available on the Power platform. Currently, you can get BW scale up and scale out, up to 16 nodes, but potentially larger if a customer really wants to go there. Almost the entire suite is available. We're talking about ERP, we're talking CRM, SRM, SCM, as well as what's of a lot of interest to a lot of people, S4 HANA. S4 HANA and Simple Finance are available now on the Power platform, and the list goes on and on and on. So what I'm going to try to do is take you through a little bit of the story about Power Systems, the value proposition that we have as far as the HANA environment, as well as to try to level set in terms of how it differentiates compared to some of the other platforms in the industry. So it's easy as IT people to get very focused on the capabilities of the platform and really lose track of why is this important to customers. So what I'm trying to do here with this chart is give you a little background in terms of what is the real business value? What is it that the customers are looking for? What are the problems that they're trying to solve? So as we like to sometimes talk about in terms of availability and performance and other things, it's really important to take a step back and say, why is this important? Will the system perform not just at average utilization times, but at peak workload times? This is an important question that has to be addressed. Hopefully I'll address all these questions as we go through the presentation. Next is, not is the system going to be always up, but what happens, what do we do to keep the system from failing? What are the techniques and technologies we put in place to prevent a failure in the first place? If we do have a failure, what's the next step? Which is we have to have a quick recovery. What are the techniques we use in order to make sure the system comes back up and is operational as quickly as possible? And lastly, sometimes there's a focus on total cost of acquisition. And that's a very common thing we hear. And the real story is the value that's being put forth by the system justified? Is it bringing value to customers? So really it's a totally different approach when you look at it from a business perspective than from an IT perspective. Of course, from an IT perspective, we have all the normal stuff we talk about. We talk about response time and utilization and those things. And I will talk about those, but only in the context of how it backs up the actual solution from a customer perspective. An important question to ask also is when there are problems, and we have to be brutally honest here, every once in a while problems will happen. Do you have a vendor you can trust? Is there somebody you can contact who will help you to navigate through the issues and make sure the problems get resolved and you get back up to full business operational capability as quickly as possible? So as you look at the HANA strategy from SAP, This is a long-term strategy. This is not a one fell swoop, everything is solved. This is an evolution as we go, of course, to an in-memory and columnar database. But the long-term strategy is also the elimination of duplication. It's the simplification of processes. It is the bringing together of things that were previously separated. So if you think about how things used to be, you had many separate instances with often different types of techniques to replicate data between those different systems and use them in different ways. And then, of course, we had to do analytics, and to do analytics, we had to once again extract the data another time. So there was incredible duplication, and also data was very often out of date. So we were looking at data that was extracted a day earlier as opposed to something that's happening right now. As we move forward into the world of HANA, not only do we do, as I say, in-memory and columnar, but we now are talking about live data. We're talking about one source of the truth. We're talking about lots of different components as being applications off of that one source of the truth. Now, this is something that will evolve over time, but this is getting there quite rapidly in various different areas. One of the biggest things that's happened right away is the ability to do concurrent analytics against operational data. So this is something that has happened, and it's available with everything from Suite on HANA all the way up through running S4. So this is really a big difference maker, and over time you'll see a collapsing of these various different components together. Now, it's important to understand that as we look at the collapsing and the concurrent analytics, this means that I have one system that I have to rely on. This tends to be a scale-up system. So if that system is not available on a continual basis, it has a much bigger business impact than what we had before with a bunch of separate systems. So this is part of the story, and this, by the way, fits perfectly with the IBM strategy because our strategy is all about continuous availability, as well as, remember, as I bring more things together, the requirements go up. The amount of capacity that's required, the scalability increases. And once again, this is where Power is really in a unique position to offer the scalability. This is something that our customers have come to expect over time, and this continues on as we look into the power generation. There's another interesting thing that happens as you move into HANA, is that SAP realized that there was so much transfer of data back and forth to application servers that it caused a massive lag. There had to be all sorts of crazy things that had to be done in order to speed up applications. As we move into HANA, they said, you know what, this is a really powerful database, so why don't we move more of the computational capacity into the database server as opposed to just being in the application server? Because remember, in the application server, I've got to transfer everything to the application server, do calculations, and then bring the results back. Well, in the day of HANA, now we can have calculation engines built into the database layer, and now instead of transferring massive amounts of data back and forth, and even if you do it on Power with the built-in switch that it has in that hypervisor, it's still required a transfer of data and a delay. Now you can do your calculations down in this engine. Well, that drives even more capacitive requirements onto the platform. So you can see how this aligns beautifully with Power and the capabilities we deliver in that space. The last step here is simplification, and that's what S4 HANA brings. So with S4 HANA, what they're basically saying is, why do we have to duplicate data into multiple other areas? Why do we have to pre-calculate? Why do we have to build aggregates and materialized views? Well, historically we built these things because things were so slow transferring data back and forth, doing the calculations in different areas. Now, with these calculation engines, I can simplify, I can eliminate. So S4 is allowing significant reduction in the size of the space as well as the update area. Because now, instead of having to update all of the different copies and do all sorts of calculations and batch processing, I can get down to a very small set. In this example, you see getting down from 13 or 14 tables down to 4 tables. This is a very important story in terms of how you simplify and speed up the environment. As SAP was deciding how to support the Power environment, in the beginning, they looked at both Linux and AIX as possible options. They realized very quickly if they went down the AIX route that they would have to fork the code. And they said, this is a bad idea. So they canceled that project and basically said, this is where we're going to go forward. We are going to have one common code tree, and that code tree is going to have the support for both Power and Intel in the same code tree. They put this into place actually in November of 2014. So since November 2014, Power Linux has been in the common code tree, which means that there is outstanding support, outstanding testing. And in fact, it's so integrated into development that you can actually, as the developers are developing code, they must pass testing on both platforms for code progression to occur. So this means extremely well tested, and it also means that we get the benefit in the Power area of everything that's come before. So everything that has been developed over the years to work on the Intel platform works on the Power platform. That is what has been happening as far as this common code development environment, and this is why you see such a huge number of different SAP applications supported in a very short period of time on the Power platform because it's a common code base. The only things that are really different are the optimizations for the platform. So for instance, Power has a vector processor, Intel has vector processor capabilities. They're called differently, so the actual code calls are different. Those were the areas where we had to make changes. Intel has transactional memory, we have transactional memory. Slightly different calls once again. This is where we had to make the changes. Other than that, it was a very simple and straightforward process. So extremely good support from a code perspective. Our value proposition is fairly straightforward. And it's not that it is dramatically different than you've had in the past, but certain areas make more difference than they used to. So for instance, in the area of reliability, it was important to have memory reliability at all stages. However, the size of memory has grown dramatically. With Suite on HANA, we're looking at 30 to 40 times the amount of memory on average compared to the conventional database environment of buffer that you might have in that space. As we look at S4, it's not quite as large, but it's still probably 10 to 20 times larger. Anytime you increase the number of components in an environment, you have to pay extra special attention to the reliability of those components. So this is why Power delivers optimal reliability out of the gate. It is by default mission critical reliability. So Power doesn't give you an option to have well-protected memory, to have what is often called in the industry DDDC. Don't worry about what that means. It's basically double device correction. It says you can handle more than one event. This is something that Power delivers by default. In the Intel world, this is an option. And by the way, that option in the Intel world comes at a performance penalty. The penalty is anywhere from 40 to 60%, but we don't know exactly the impact because no vendor has actually run in that mode because there's a penalty, and all of the Intel vendors want to look good against each other, of course. So there's a performance penalty, but it's unknown. We don't have that. It's already built into the platform. And this is in addition to all the things we've delivered in the past. All of the various capabilities as far as the fault tolerance, the ability to handle faults on the fly and correct them, the ability to reboot around problems and correctly identify. These are all the things that have been there historically, but are even more important as we look at a consolidated environment. In the area of flexibility, we used Power VM as the basis of our platform. So it's built on virtualization. There's no choice to not have virtualization. This means that it has all of the capabilities for virtualization that our customers have come to expect over time, be it multiple partitions on the same time, be it capacity on demand, be it the ability to have production with non-production and high availability all in the same cluster of systems. All those things are there, and they will continue to be enhanced over time, and I'll show you a chart a little bit later that talks a little bit more about virtualization. Lastly, I have performance. Now, you might have seen IBM presentations in the past, and we always start with performance. And I will tell you the performance is important, but performance really needs to put in the right context. Remember, SAP has a support matrix, and they tell you how much memory is supported on a particular platform. Do you really care whether or not we need 40 cores and the other guys need 80 or 100? The answer is, it's all about price. Where you might care is what happens when I have a peak workload. Do all systems perform equally well at peaks? What happens when I want to put multiple things together? I want to consolidate. Well, if I can use fewer cores, then I have a better ability to consolidate and put different partitions in the same system. That's when it makes a difference. So you can see we work into performance as it benefits the other environments as opposed to starting with performance as a key differentiator of the Power Platform. We do have great performance, about twice the performance on a per core basis compared to Intel. Now, a lot of the Intel vendors came out with appliances and did this first. And SAP was very, very big behind the whole appliance concept. The reason was there was a lot of complexity, a lot of moving parts. And in the beginning, what we didn't want to have was a difficult job of getting systems started up and implemented. So the appliance concept basically said, great, let me build a system with everything that I need. Of course, the system resources, but also the network, the storage, the operating system, all the firmware, all the device drivers, all built in. One of the nice things about this is single throat to choke. When you have a problem, you call SAP. The problem is it's inflexible. If you wanted to add components, you may or may not be able to do that. If you wanted to increase beyond certain limits, well, you would often be in a situation of having to throw away the components or reuse the components for some other purpose. And if you wanted to use virtualization or other things, you would very quickly be unable to do these things because it's not part of that appliance model. So many customers pushed for, and SAP agreed to support something called TDI, the Tailored Data Center Integration. It basically says that you can pick apart the parts you want, use your best-of-breed standards and practices, use your tools and techniques, and now you have the ability to customize it and have HANA be part of your environment as opposed to customizing your environment around HANA. It's a totally different approach. We use TDI as the basis for our configuration, and we are not offering an appliance at all. It is all based on TDI. So here's the basic structure of our system. You'll notice each one of these boxes is independent. By this, it means you can choose what you use for each one of these levels, depending on availability, of course, of the various components. I'll start at the bottom. From a storage perspective, you can use anything that SAP supports. And SAP has the certification matrix, once again, of storage subsystems. So we're assuming here that customers are going to want to use the systems they've had historically. Hopefully you have IBM systems for storage, but if you don't, EMC systems, HDS, NetApp, and many, many others are supported on this platform. The choice is yours based on meeting the KPIs that SAP has established. And they have a tool called HWCCT, Hardware Configuration Check Tool, which basically checks to make sure that you have the right latency and throughput capabilities of your storage subsystem. Let's talk about the server. I'm going to show you which servers are supported, but basically we have geared this around the Power 8 platform. Power 7 Plus is supported, but only for non-production. So for production purposes, it is a Power 8 environment. You could have a standalone system. It does nothing but run this environment for one particular VM if you wanted to, or you could have multiple different VMs. And by the way, I use the term VM and LPARs kind of interchangeably. It's the same basic concept, multiple different partitions at the same time. I'll get into the specific ones that are supported in just a minute. Operating system. Today, it is SUSE SLES11 SP4. That is what is supported for this environment. IBM, SAP, and Red Hat are also working towards an eventual availability on the Power Platform using the Red Hat environment. This will probably be something in the next year timeframe. This is simply a question of we had to start somewhere, and the place that SAP has extremely good competence and the area where their development is located actually is on the SUSE platform. Next, we talk about the file systems. If you know some of our competitors, they started with a parallel file system concept. In fact, that was the System X brand from IBM, used IBM GPFS, General Parallel File System, because the assumption there was it was an appliance and was built-in storage. Therefore, to scale out, they had to have some sort of parallel technology. We took a different approach. We started with TDI. And so the assumption was you had a really robust external storage subsystem. And as a result, we don't need to add the cost and complexity of an additional component, even though it happens to be IBM componentry. So instead, we're using the built-in journal file system that is available on all the Linux platforms called XFS. It's a very robust journal file system, so that is perfect for this particular purpose. High availability. We support everything that SAP supports. There is something called auto standby. It's basically a dual attached disk environment. And there's also another one called system replication. It's up to customers to choose what they like best. In many of these environments, there will also be another component, which is the cluster manager. This is required, especially if you're looking at system replication technologies. So, which one do we choose? Well, it's not up to us. It's up to customers once again. Most often we see customers choosing the SUSE package because it comes with the SUSE for SAP applications environment. That gives you an HA extension environment that essentially gives you the cluster management capabilities. That's required with the system replication, not with the auto host failover capability. The goal eventually is what you're going to see is HANA is just another VM in the environment. It's just another partition. I'm not trying to say that it's not important or it's not large. What I'm trying to say is it fits into your environment seamlessly. It is another LPAR. Today, it's a dedicated or dedicated donating LPAR, but in the future, this will go into the shared pool environment. So you'll see on this chart, I have a mixture of different LPARs. I have HANA, I have HA, I have app servers. For that matter, you could have other things that are not part of SAP at all. There could be Oracle or DB2 partitions or WebSphere or whatever it might be. These can all be located on the same servers and using a common shared environment. You can share I/O using the virtual I/O server, or you can have dedicated I/O or some combination thereof. Once again, it's a question of fitting into your environment rather than having to customize your environment around the HANA systems. As you look at the way we do virtualization, basically there are two different things that are supported today. One is if you want an all production server, you can have up to 4 simultaneous production partitions. That's on the E870, E880 platforms. On the lower platforms, you can have up to 3 simultaneous production platforms at the same time, production LPARs. They can be standalone or they can be what they call MDC, which is their multi-tenancy capability. You can use any combination thereof that you would like. So you can see here now we can mix and match. The minimum size of these are 4 cores, maximum size is 96 cores. And there are different ratios based on whether it's BW or whether it's Suite on HANA or S4 in terms of the memory to core ratio. But this is essentially how we build out systems. It's highly granular. You can change on a per core basis. So if you're running with 20 cores and you want 5% more capacity, you add an extra core. Or you could take away. Now you do have to restart HANA for each one of these changes today. This is something that SAP is working on making it more dynamic in the future. But the platform is completely dynamic and allows you to make changes as you see fit. You can also use techniques like live partition mobility and capacity on demand. So these are all supported in this environment. So this is a all production environment. But let's say you wanted to be able to use, and these are dedicated partitions. Well, let's say you wanted to be able to reuse the capacity that's not being used by production. One of the biggest things we've heard from customers is they don't like having systems sitting there at 10% utilization because they feel like that's a waste of asset. So what you can do, in fact, in the power environment is you can reduce the number of production LPARs by 1, and then you can add in a shared pool. And this shared pool now allows you to run multiple different non-production or non-SAP environments in that shared pool as you see fit. And now what happens is it's what's called dedicated donating. The production partitions make capacity available when they do not require it. They advise the hypervisor, and the shared pool can now use that excess resource. So it's a very efficient way of setting up a system and using the maximum capacity of that system. As I said, eventually, what we want to see is production supported even in the shared pool, and that'll be coming over time. Some of you may have heard that VMware also has very good support for partitioning and for production support in the HANA environment. The answer is kind of yes, kind of no. With VMware 5.5, you can have up to 4 different production partitions. However, they're on a socket basis. So you use an entire socket even if you only need 1 core. And so, for instance, on the latest generation of systems, the Broadwell EX systems, if you're using 24 cores and you need 25, you have to use an entire second socket. So it's a very non-granular sort of approach. This is not very efficient. VMware 6.0 is all supported, but only with one production VM on the entire system and nothing else may be on that system. So it's not a very good way of sharing resources. And you'll notice here, there's no way of setting up a, quote, shared pool because each socket has to be dedicated. There's no sharing of resources in their environment. There's also a minimum, according to SAP, 12% performance penalty versus bare metal. They say minimum because they also say that there are situations where there's been a lot more than that, but they don't know exactly what it'll be for each individual customer. So this will be one of those things where customers will have to experience it for themselves before they can find out what the real impact is. Systems that are supported. All of, I'll call the mainstream Power 8 systems are supported. What I mean by this is the systems that are capable of supporting SUSE and have full memory protection. Back to that reliability story, full memory protection. We have another line of systems called the LC systems. These are Linux cluster systems. Excellent systems, but they have Intel level of reliability. We think reliability is so important that we're not going to support HANA on those platforms, at least for the foreseeable future. Over time, it might be a different story, but right now, we think that it's important to have full protection, and therefore, that's why you see only these systems supported. The ones that are highlighted in green are our solution editions. Solution editions are nothing more than a packaging and pricing methodology. You're not limited by these, and in fact, some of these are a starting point. You can add additional capacity above and beyond, so you could have a mixed environment. And also, the ones in green come in certain number of cores, memory, and megahertz levels. You can choose any of these systems, as long as it's a minimum of 2 sockets today. You could get 1 socket if you really wanted to have that. It just requires a special approval by SAP. So look at this as a very broad, very granular product family, a lot of options for how you mix and match and choose the right platform based on your particular requirements in a point in time, as well as over time if you want to grow and have the system be able to seamlessly react to those changes. From a services perspective, of course, we offer installation services, we offer operational support services, and we have some post-install services such as health checks and updates to the system over time. I'd like to focus on one of these things because this is one of the major things that customers focus on when they look at appliance models, which is, do you have the option for one throat to choke? One number you can call that will address all the requirements. And in fact, yes, we do. In the United States and Canada, this is out of a group in Dallas. It's called Custom Technical Services. Essentially what happens here is you can call them. This is an optional service that you sign up for, but you can call them. They will do the initial problem determination and diagnosis, determine where the issues are, and then they will do the proper transfers to the groups. Obviously, all the IBM groups, including our storage groups, as well as warm transfers to SAP and to SUSE. Now, you might say, okay, great, now they've thrown it over the fence. No, they don't, because they stay engaged until the problem is resolved. So it's truly a one throat to choke. You have one group to talk to, and they will make sure that you get the problem resolved as quickly as possible. So this is back to the, do you have a partner to trust? This is a key differentiator with IBM. Yes, you do. We will stand behind it. So that brings me to the end of my major remarks here. Hopefully you have a better understanding now of the Power Platform, what it brings and offers for the HANA environment, as well as the key attributes, the reliability, the flexibility of the platform, and lastly, of course, the performance to give you great performance at all levels, not just at the base level when the system is running at nominal 10%, but when it's also driving at 95, 100% utilization.
I think we're out of time. I want to thank very much Alfred and Doug for coming out this afternoon and presenting. So thank you both for that. This is hosted by thinkASG today, IBM. And again, thank you for coming. It's been fantastic.